Hi, you're watching Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about one of the things that really pains me the most, probably, about Star Wars. And that's really saying something when you think about some of the missteps that have happened in the history of Star Wars filmmaking. And that thing that pains me is the undermining and the outright destruction, even, of the character arc, the redemption arc of Han Solo. And the reason I want to talk about that is because about 2 weeks or so ago, when Disney Plus was launched, a very astute and very keen, I'd have to say, Star Wars fan got on there and he watched Star Wars A New Hope, which is pretty amazing when you think about the first thing you do when Disney Plus launches is that you go straight to Star Wars and you watch A New Hope. That's a dedicated fan. That man deserves a medal for his dedication to Star Wars. Anyway, he's watching it, and all of a sudden he discovers that there is yet another altered version of that famous Cantina scene where Han shoots Greedo. That's why I'm wearing my Greedo shirt today, for those who sort of can't see. Look at that, Greedo. Right, and there's another altered version anyway on the Disney Plus streaming service. They've got this new version. Apparently George Lucas did it, but we haven't seen it until now. And what we've got now is not only does Greedo shoot first, which is absolutely stupid. I'll talk more about that in a moment. But now they've added this new and extremely pointless piece of dialogue where he says what sounds like McClunky. And it literally is. If you haven't seen it, go on YouTube this thing and watch it. It is just, it's comical. McClunky. It's crazy. It is, like, I look at this scene and I don't know why, but this scene seems to have become like this weird obsession, or it was a weird obsession for George Lucas. And there's so much interference has happened to that one particular scene. And whenever I think about that interference, for some reason, I always think about that Saturday Night Live skit with Christopher Walken, when they're playing Don't Fear the Reaper, and he keeps interrupting and he says, it's great, but it needs more cowbell. And that's what I think of for some reason. Look, Lucas, this is great. I love the scene, but it needs more interference. And it's like he constantly keeps going back to the scene and interfering with it. Now, the frustrating thing about this, and this is really a major problem in Star Wars, and as I said, for me, this is the thing that pains me most about Star Wars. And the reason it pains me most is not just because of what it does to the character arc of Han Solo, but also because George Lucas is the one who actually starts this interference with Han Solo's character arc by changing that scene. And that scene is really quite pivotal, I think, to who Han Solo is and his total overarching character development and the transformation he undergoes as a character. It's something that people often forget about. We've had a lot of talk because of The Last Jedi about the undermining or the outright destruction of the character of Luke Skywalker in that film because of the way that character was really was not well written in that film. And there was I think people are right to say that they feel there was a certain disrespect that was shown to that character and to who he was and to what he'd become. And then all of a sudden it's sort of completely destroyed by Rian Johnson. But in actual fact, Han Solo, the destruction of his character came first. It came well before this. And what makes this so frustrating is that George Lucas is the one who started this by interfering with A New Hope in this particular scene. Like the prequels were, when you think about the prequels, they were new mistakes. George Lucas created something new, but the creative process was flawed, and so the outcome was flawed. You think about the new Disney films, a new creative process by a different group of people, and the creative process produces something that is flawed. But what you had in that original trilogy with the character arc of Han Solo was near perfection. It's a perfect character arc. And to have the creator, George Lucas, go back and actually interfere with that and to create an inferior version of something and to add a mistake to something that wasn't a mistake, that really is frustrating. And like I said, it really, the big issue is the undermining of the character arc of Han Solo, and particularly his arc is one of redemption. Now, in A New Hope, when we first meet him, he's clearly a villain. And that's why this scene is so essential, because it establishes his credentials of villainy. It establishes to us that this guy is so self-interested and he's so, he's cutthroat. He'll do anything to survive. and he'll shoot someone in cold blood even. And that's perfect for Han Solo and where he needs to be in A New Hope. And then you see throughout The New Hope, he doesn't even transform in that movie when you think about it. Even when they rescue Princess Leia, he's only doing it because he thinks there's potentially a bounty in it for him. There's money for him. I bet she's rich. That's the only way to convince this guy to actually help you out and do the right thing. And it's not until the very end of the film that he actually comes back and appears in the Millennium Falcon to save Luke. That's sort of the first moment that he does anything really where you could say it's not his own sort of self-interest that's on the line. And even then you could say is it the pangs of just a guilty conscience that have really called him back? There's no money in it for him, sure, but you sort of sense that maybe, just maybe, he's come back because he couldn't quite allow himself to leave Luke in that situation. Now, then we get Empire Strikes Back, and what we have in Empire Strikes Back is a character in Han Solo he's starting to change, but he is still conflicted by this call to conversion, and the change is not complete. He wants to go back. He wants to leave the Rebel Alliance. Again, he's caught up in this conscience trap and this call to the former life of vice. And he's sort of pushed aside that call to virtue to pursue that. And then his character arc is not completed until we get to Return of the Jedi. And it's quite interesting. It's really, again, I've talked about this in previous videos and with other films where you see baptismal imagery. And that's exactly what happens really with Han Solo. He goes down into the carbonite freezing machine, and he is a man effectively who goes down into, it's a type of water when you think about it. What is ice? What is being frozen? It is symbolic of solid water there. There's a metaphor, a symbolism for baptism, which is all about going down into the pit, to the world of the dead and coming out alive. And he literally does that. He goes down into the state of stasis, the state of death, and then he is brought back. And it's in that film where he is brought back that the fullness of his redemption is realized. And the first inkling we have that this is a brand new character that we're dealing with now is when he is the one who volunteers to take the shuttle mission to Endor. And so this is this dangerous mission, and he's the one who volunteers to actually put himself at risk for the sake of this really important mission. And then there's that scene, that really important scene at the end of the film where he still doesn't understand that Luke and Leia are brother and sister, and so he thinks that Luke and Leia are in love with each other, or that Leia is in love with Luke, and so he very self-sacrificially says to her that he'll get out of the way. And he knows that she loves Luke, and he's not going to be an interference to that. And it's sort of like it's him saying, look, I really hope you find your happiness in this relationship. Now, that is quite profound, because this is a character who starts as a villain, a cold-hearted villain who will do anything, including killing someone, to get his own way. And then by the end of the trilogy, he is now so self-sacrificial that he is willing to walk away from a relationship with someone that he clearly has feelings for, and that he has an infatuation towards. He's willing to walk away from that in order to ensure her happiness. And that's quite a profound thing. And so what you have is this character arc. It is very much what you would call Augustinian, like St. Augustine, this character who starts in a place of vice and then has a conversion experience, and then it's through a woman, and then that conversion experience leads to a life of virtue. And it's a perfect character arc over the trilogy. But what happens is, when Lucas goes back and interferes with that scene with Greedo where he shoots Greedo, and he did shoot first, it was cold-blooded murder, and it was perfect because of what it tells us and where it situates his character at the very beginning. But when Lucas goes back and changes that scene and has Han, in the most clumsy and absurd way possible, shooting in self-defense, all of a sudden you are now starting to actually undermine the character of Han Solo. He doesn't destroy the character of Han Solo. He doesn't destroy the redemption arc in the way that J.J. Abrams does. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But he certainly starts that process of undermining it with the Greedo change. And I have a theory about why this happened. I think that basically that Han he became a much beloved character in Star Wars. And also Harrison Ford really took off as an actor after that time as well. And so I think that what you've got is a situation where George Lucas never envisaged that Star Wars would be as big as it was. He never knew it was going to be this big. He never envisaged that it was actually, he didn't even think it was going to be completed. He didn't even think they were going to let him tell the whole story. And it's very clear, based on what we've seen in the original trilogy, he didn't have the whole story mapped out, despite what he might try and claim later. It's pretty clear when you look at it. I mean, look at the relationship between, or the interactions between Luke and Leia, and then all of a sudden they're brother and sister. I think you'd have to be naive to believe that Luke and Leia as brother and sister was there right from the very beginning, and that George Lucas knew that and he wrote the story with that in mind right from the very beginning. If he did, there's some much bigger questions we need to ask about his character based on what we saw in that film. To me, it's clear that things like that, they were afterthoughts. He went back and he sort of tried to retcon what he'd already previously written. There's other things as well that it's kind of clear, and you look at the way the prequels are and things like that, that clearly he has ideas that he adds to stories after the stories are complete. And sometimes you can get away with that, but when you add ideas to a story that are actually transformational to the original plot and raise serious questions or create plot holes, then you've got some issues. And George Lucas, he does that. And I don't think he ever expected Han, to become perhaps possibly the beloved and sort of central character that he is in this story. And so what happens is you got Han becomes this beloved character. His redemption arc only fully reveals itself in that final film in a big way. And now he's a very different character. And I think for George Lucas, new character now in Return of the Jedi, who's also become this massive and beloved actor. And I get the sense that what Lucas did was he thought, I just can't bear the thought of Han Solo and Harrison Ford being involved in this awful cold-blooded murder right back at the beginning in that cantina. And I need to fix that because it just doesn't sit well with me anymore. And I think this is the thing that Lucas really, he has a very black and white dichotomy with characters when you look at the way he creates his characters. As a general rule, there's sort of this black and white dichotomy. He doesn't do the grey, the middle ground grey ambiguity aspect of a character often or in a very strong way. I mean, think about Anakin even, because the whole concept of Anakin in the prequels is he is supposed to be a character who's struggling with the grey areas. But what in actual fact you see is a good guy, a hero who is conflicted. And then what happens, it's quite interesting, once he transforms and becomes the villain, the transformation is just so absurdly sharp. It happens way too fast. And the build-up is not properly written because Lucas doesn't really do that ambiguity in a character particularly well. And so he didn't write a lot of the ambiguity that you need to sort of get to that big moment where all of a sudden he's now the dark character. So he goes from light to dark and it's very sharp. There's not much really in between. And so I think for him, the idea of Harrison Ford, who's clearly this hero by the end of the trilogy, I think for him, it just didn't sit well with him. That at the beginning, he was clearly a character with a great darkness about him. And I think the sentimental, emotional aspect of George Lucas went back and tweaked it for that reason. But it is abundantly clear that Han shot first. And I don't just say that because that was the original version. It's very clear when you look at the way that scene is shot, the way it's blocked out, all of those kind of things, and then the subsequent attempts to change and re-edit that scene, it is clear that there's no way that scene was ever set up with a concept of Han defending himself and Greedo shooting first. The subsequent versions of that are just an absolute mess. They've ruined something that actually was good and made sense. And so it's abundantly clear that it was not meant to be that way at all. And what you see subsequently just has ruined things. But it has also undermined the character arc. It's undermining his character arc because now the shift and the transformation that he undergoes is not as stark. He's just a conflicted sort of good guy who needs a little bit of encouragement and a push in the right direction, and he becomes one of the goodies. But that's not who Han Solo is, and that's not how a redemption arc works. The more intense the villainy and the evil in a character, the greater the conversion is, the more meaningful and profound it is when they actually undergo that transformation. But like I said, it's not just Lucas who undermines it. In fact, J.J. Abrams outright destroyed that redemption arc in The Force Awakens. Now, a lot of people attack Rian Johnson for the way he destroyed, quote unquote, the character of Luke Skywalker, but they forget that in actual fact what J.J. Abrams does is he has what is some clearly lazy writing. Basically what he wants for his film, he wants the old villainous smuggler type Han Solo. He doesn't want the new Han Solo. And he doesn't also want to actually take the time and effort to write a character arc or a line of plot development that actually makes sense, where you take Han Solo, the guy who has now become a hero, who's now almost certainly at this age the retired war hero, and who has given himself to fighting the forces of evil and darkness, to sort of transform him again into someone who's fallen back into his old ways. J.J. Abrams doesn't take the time to write how that would make sense. He just has him abandoning his wife and his son and going back to this life of villainy. And it completely undermines the redemption character arc. And in a really big way, it really destroys that character arc. And so at both ends, it's been chipped away at, which is just so very frustrating. And for me, because my concern with Star Wars is it's not so much the peripheral stuff for me. You wouldn't call me a Star Wars nerd who's obsessed with all the tiny little technical details. For me, it is the mythological heart of the story that matters, and why I consider Star Wars to be so good. And what the destruction of the character arc, the redemption arc of Han Solo does, is it really tears the heart out of the central mythology of this film. It does great damage to it, and that is really, really frustrating. Now, say what you want about Rian Johnson and what he did to Luke Skywalker, but when you compare what he did with what J.J. Abrams did to Han Solo, at least Rian Johnson wrote a new version of Luke. He got it wrong, but at least he wrote a new version of Luke. What J.J. Abrams does is he just takes the old Han Solo and sort of transplants him into his film. And it's lazy. It's just lazy. And it, as I said, it just destroys that redemption character arc, which for me is the most painful thing about Star Wars. It's not the Disney films, it's not the prequels, it's the way in which you have the central aspect of the mythology, which has been completely undermined, and it's been done. Originally, the guy who started doing this was the guy who created it, and he did it to a character arc that was near pitch perfect. And before he goes back and interferes with that Greedo scene. As per usual, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please let me know what you think in the comments section below. And if you like the content I'm creating and you'd like to see more of it, then please leave a tip in the tip jar on PayPal. There's a link for PayPal in the video description below. If that doesn't work for you, you can go to my homepage, and on the main page of my YouTube channel, you will find a button at the top right of the homepage that will allow you to donate directly to PayPal. If you're not already subscribed, please hit the subscribe button and don't forget to hit the notifications bell as well. Thanks for watching. See you next time on Left Foot Media.